over here on this hand, I've got Bruce Springsteen, who, even though I know maybe three songs max by, I consider one of the greatest artists in rock and roll. And over here, in this hand, I've got the Beatles. Now, there's no saying you can want in one hand and crap in the other.
Hmm.
And I'm immediately reminded of that because over here is Bruce Springsteen and over here is the crap.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me today is Dustin. Welcome to the jungle. Welcome to the podcast. It's
Thanks, Jesse,
time.
for having me. You
It's
know,
time. Yes, go ahead.
when I accepted this booking, I
Yeah.
got to say this isn't the Jesse Jackson I had in mind. But whatever.
No, I do feel like that. True story, Dustin. When my wife and I got married in '84, and we lived in a small town called Lake Charles, Louisiana. And
Linda, you're close to my neck of the woods. Then.
Oh, what's that?
I'm originally from Tupelo, Mississippi, but we would go to Biloxi a lot to hang out because nothing good ever happened where I'm from.
Right. And so she called to the tuck shop and said,
What?
Jesse, the tuxedo shop.
Oh, okay.
Because we were going to get married. And she said, Jesse Jackson's supposed to be there. Jesse Jackson, he's in town.
Did they roll out the red carpet?
And my wife was like, sad to say, no, that isn't the Jesse Jackson. So, and true story, Justin, when he was running for president, I called Austin to make a hotel reservation. I go, hi, this is Jesse Jackson. I need to book a hotel reservation. And like, oh, we'll be glad to help you, Mr. Jackson. And after a few minutes, she goes, don't you normally have someone that does this for you, Reverend? I'm like, no, I am a Jesse Jackson. I am not the Jesse Jackson. I often joke if I'm in front of a live audience, he's out of the news a lot more now, but back then I would often go, hi, I'm Jesse Jackson. I look different than I do on TV. You're used to seeing me on a black and white set.
You know what's funny? In real life, I hang out with probably, and this isn't by design, it's just, you meet people and then certain groups of people pull you into their group every time, no matter where you go, without any kind of effort. You're always going to end up kind of getting drawn into a group of people one way or the other, no matter where you go. I've moved across the goddamn country. Oh, sorry, the dang country.
It's all right.
And I'm sorry, I've got a big note that says don't cuss for the show. And
that's okay.
Right off the bat. I moved from Mississippi to Jefferson City, Missouri.
Okay.
And still, the vast majority of people I end up hanging out with are black folks.
Okay.
And one thing I've seen in real life is, and this is just the ones I've talked to. I'm not racially dividing anybody or trying to start that kind of conversation or anything like that. But when it comes to Jesse Jackson, inside I hate to say the black community as a large, because I'm obviously not a part of that community, but I'm definitely friends with a lot of people that are. And the thing I keep seeing when it comes to Jesse Jackson, when he comes up in conversation, I have never honestly in real life met a black person that likes Jesse Jackson that doesn't have their own TV show.
Okay, how funny.
I'm just saying, not saying everybody.
Yeah.
I'm saying the people that I've met and the people that I've hung out with. Most people think he's they think he makes his living off of someone else's suffering.
Yes.
And I get that a lot, and I can't in good conscience condone that, but I don't see the other side of it. You know what I mean? It's hard for me to comment on those kind of issues, because I'm not, as bad as I hate to say it, I mean, it's true. I'm not directly affected by them.
Yeah, and what's interesting, Dustin, is you being aware of that puts you ahead of, unfortunately, a lot of people that um, we're that I sometimes have a trouble talking to. I'm a 61-year-old white guy. I was born in Louisiana.
Really? I was guessing like 40 something. So
No,
good
no,
luck.
I'm 61. I was born in 1959, the
Shit. I
Eisenhower
mean,
Misadventure.
darn.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey.
So I know my life experiences, I see things totally different than, even my son or someone else, right? It is just do that. And for you to be aware of that just alone says, you're a good dude and you're just trying to do the best you can.
I
So
hope everybody is.
I hope so too. So you mentioned grew up in Mississippi. Um, I haven't even given you a chance. Give your elevator pitch. Talk.
My elevator pitch.
Who are
Oh,
you and what are you doing?
it's bad. I don't know the elevator pitch from the podcast, but I do know the elevator pitch from my real job. So here we
Okay,
go.
that's good.
I've never done an elevator pitch for Guns and Radio, but here we're going to try.
All right.
And first off, I need to apologize to your audience because I know I sound like crap tonight, but I'm sick and I'm doing my best to get through it. So
Well, luckily you're using Guinness to try to,
I
help your
am,
sinus.
I am,
Well, you're
and
recording this on St. Patrick's Day.
it is. We're taping this on St. Patty's Day, and this is my third whiskey tonight. So if I would have done this an hour ago, I probably wouldn't have gotten this far. So without coughing. So
Okay.
elevator pitch, Guns and Radio. Okay, guys, my name is Dustin Burcham. My real name is Dustin Burcham. My stage name, my podcast name, whatever it's called in this field, I do not know. I am not. I'm an amateur stuck in a world of people who are much better at what they do than I am. But my podcast is called Guns and Radio. I host it with my friend Chris Caputo, who I've never actually met in real life. He's from Toronto, Canada. I'm originally from Tupelo, Mississippi, by way of Jefferson City, Missouri. Each and every week, we have a giant wheel, if you will, more like a lottery. We say a wheel because it's audio, nobody can see us anyway. So the visual of a giant wheel is much better sounding than the fact that we just have names being drawn randomly out of a hat. Each and every week, we randomly pick a song by Guns N' Roses, Velvet Revolver, Duff McKagan's Loaded / featuring Miles Kennedy, the Juju Hounds, or any of the bands or solo projects from the original 5 members of GNR. We choose one song every week. We break that song down, we listen to it, we review it, and we give it a rating. If it sounds like the Pod of Thunder podcast, which is a Kiss podcast that I am in no way affiliated with, that's because it's a direct ripoff of Pod of Thunder. Uh, and we say that in the first episode. Now, in episode 8, I think we're on our 91st episode now, so it gets a little fuzzy. And I think within the first 10 episodes, the guys from Pot of Thunder came on to our show. They heard about us ripping them off. They listened to the show. They liked it. They contacted with us. They came on the show. They gave us their blessing to rip off their show. So now I'm going to call it a spinoff of Pot of Thunder, even though I'm in no way affiliated with them.
So in the It's a Small World, J.B. Clark, who also was from Tupelo, Mississippi, and Rob Carmack do Bruce Springsteen Sings the Alphabet podcast, where they took every Bruce Springsteen song and talked about it in alphabetical order.
Nice.
They did not do it random. And they said in their very first podcast that there's alphabetical Beatles, which was a bunch of guys going through every Beatles song in alphabetical order. And they reached out to them and said, will you be offended if we steal this format? And they said, one, give us, share that, we inspired you. And two, you got to finish. Like
Yeah.
you can't stop. All right. And so, and now then the alphabetical Beatles has finished, but JB and Rob have gone through, they went through a whole season. They went through every song. Then their second season was they went through every album in chronological order, talking about every song and with a different context, right? Like it's a different discussion, the song by itself compared to what it is on like the album. And now
Okay.
then the third season, Bruce has now released a couple of albums. They're going to go back and catch that. So
It's
I
interesting.
yes.
It's interesting to me that you bring to me both Bruce Springsteen and the Beatles, because here's what I
Yes.
hear.
Okay.
Bruce Springsteen is a guy I'm a casual fan of. Don't know more than, of course, the hits they play on the radio, and the one that we're going to talk about a little later tonight that I heard for the first time tonight, which, by the way, opened my eyes to I need to dig a little deeper into this library. Uh,
I have a
anyway,
proposal for you in a little bit, Dustin.
okay.
That's a tease. Okay.
Okay. Over here on this hand, I've got Bruce Springsteen, who, even though I know maybe 3 songs max by, I consider one of the greatest artists in rock and roll. And over here, in this hand, I've got the Beatles. Now, there's an old saying, you can want in one hand and crap in the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm immediately reminded of that because over here is Bruce Springsteen and over here is the crap.
You're
And
not a Beatles fan.
I despise the Beatles. Anybody that listens to my podcast, I've pissed off every Beatles fan in the world at least once. And
That's
Nirvana.
funny.
There's 2
Yeah.
bands I absolutely hate. And, and that's the Beatles and Nirvana. I think the Beatles are the most overrated band in the world. Now, I think, granted, considering that back in the day before the Beatles came along, all you really had was Teen Angel, and not a boring crap. But then, like, here comes the Beatles, and all of a sudden, here's decent music to the ears of somebody who'd never heard decent music before. Yeah, I get it. But but fast forward to this year when we've had decent music come and go at this point, the Beatles are far at the bottom of that list.
So
Second only to Nirvana.
So what I'm going to propose and be thinking about this is I talked about my How Many podcast where we talk about different artists and bands, and it is very clear. I graduated high school in '77, and I kind of quit listening to music a lot in the '80s. So
Well, I mean, you didn't have anything good come out since
yeah.
what, 92?
So you put $100,000 in front of me and say name 10 Guns N' Roses songs, and I could not do it without a computer.
Well, we can fix that tonight. I'm going to open your eyes to some beauty.
So what's interesting is I had a guy, and that's one of my catchphrases.
You see what I did though there?
Yeah.
I took the thing where I said I was right about your thing that you like, and I crapped on it. And and then I took, but I'm going to show you why I'm right about my thing. That's me being a jerk. And
no, not being a jerk at all. So
I want to say though, the whole Beatles thing,
yeah,
like, yes, it's true. I do hate the Beatles, but I really play it up just for
absolutely. Yeah. It's shtick. Well, that's like I put down, the local sports station had a thing called Bands of Your Lives, and there was 11 questions. And the first 2 questions was band you hate and band you don't get. And I said, and band you hate and band you just don't understand or you think is overrated. That was it. And I said,
I think you don't get is a good topic.
Yeah. Led Zeppelin and, Grateful Dead. I just don't get them. And
that's very good. I don't get Grateful Dead either.
So, and my friends, like when we have specifically talked about Guns N' Roses, they're like, how do you not know these? Like, because it's like Guns N' Roses has 30 hits, And so David Fetter was on the podcast about a month ago, and he does a Bee Gees podcast. And
nice.
Yeah, and his
Talk
Like,
about fucking or freaking
yeah,
explicit, or what am I thinking? Deep cuts. Like they
exactly.
got one hit.
And that's what he talked about. He said that um, Bruce and the Bee Gees have something in common. If someone says, I don't like Bruce Springsteen, my first question is, have you ever listened to anything besides Born in the USA CD? And he says, and if someone says, I don't like the Bee Gees, have you ever listened to anything besides Saturday Night Fever? Right? So
Yeah.
he sent me 10 Bee Gees songs that I didn't know. He said, here are 10 songs you probably don't know. And then I sent him 10 Springsteen songs he probably didn't know. And we each picked 5. And we did a follow-up podcast where we played a clip of the song. You discussed, this is why I picked this song. This is why I like it. This is what I didn't like about it. Then I would do that. So I propose that would be interesting for us to do, like maybe in 4 to 6 weeks, like, we could follow up. And that way, because you just said, oh, I can blow your mind. I can give you songs that you wouldn't thought of.
I can give you a Guns N' Roses song. I can give you at least 3 that I know you've never heard of. And if you listen to them and really listen to them, and they don't, and I don't care if you're the surliest, meanest, baddest man on the planet, I can give you 3 Guns N' Roses songs. This band that's known for cocaine, fire, and piss. And I can give you 3 songs by them. And I don't care how mean and how rough and how whatever you are, if you do not have tears in your eyes by the time those songs are over, I don't think you would have a soul.
All right, I love that. All right, so we're gonna do that, Dustin. Growing up, I always like to start at the beginning. What kind of was your family into music? Was there a lot of music on the radio? You're with your parents? Did you have siblings? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I don't talk too much about my older days, mainly because I'm going to be honest. I've been drinking, so you're going to get something I wouldn't give nobody else. I was born into a highly conservative Christian family. My father plays bass, and now he plays guitar, and he can play one of the meanest guitars I have ever heard in my life. But he's weird because he can't do it if anybody's watching. Like if I sneak into his house when he don't know I'm coming in, you'll hear him in there shredding, and he plays the blues, and you'll hear him in there shredding like he should be somebody famous. And then as soon as he knows somebody's listening, he starts screwing up. And he would be pissed if he heard me tell that, but he don't know really much about technology, so he ain't gonna be listening.
Okay, Dustin's dad. We're not talking about you.
No, I love my dad. My dad's one of my heroes in life.
Yeah.
But I was born into a insanely Christian conservative home. They didn't let me listen to any kind of music that wasn't like Bill Gaither freaking gospel. And I'm talking about Southern Quartet, like I'll fly away, oh glory.
Yeah. Yeah, I was raised Southern Baptist.
Okay, that kind of BS. I got you beat. I was raised Pentecostal. Top that.
Yes, exactly.
And my dad always played bass. He always played at church. There's a lot of things, and and I'm not mad about it. I am mad about it, but I've given myself the excuse that my family didn't know any better.
Yeah, it's that famous Maya Angelou, quote, like when I knew better, I did better, right?
Yeah.
And so exactly.
So I give my family that excuse so that I can kind of try to what's the word I'm looking for? Therapy, and move on from the mental damage and scars that I have.
So I don't know
religion.
I don't want to get in a world of got you, but one of my mom's favorite sayings was, I would kill you if I could afford to bury you.
My grandma told me once, if you kill yourself, I'll bury you.
But they meant that with love in their heart,
No,
right?
she was pissed off when she said that to me.
Oh,
Let me tell you right now. She's one of the sweetest old ladies,
I
and
understand.
I went through a bit of a dick phase in my younger
Okay.
days. Uh, I have a freaking long story, but I calmed down over time. If you hear some thunder, I apologize. It's stormy outside,
Okay.
and I'm sick, so I need the window open to
No,
be
you're
able to
good.
get
You're
breathe.
good.
Um, but no, they I was raised very Pentecostal, very if it ain't this kind of gospel, it's devil worship.
Right.
The satanic cult BS frenzy of the 80s, that we, you know what I'm talking about, the how in the 80s everything was some kind of satanic cult was coming for
Yes.
your kids and all that bull crap.
Yeah.
Being from Mississippi, that crap continued into the well into the 90s because we're
Yes.
so damn backwards.
Right.
And like I said, I get emotional and I get ticked off when I really talk about it a lot, but I do my best to remind myself my family just didn't know any better. And whoa, sorry,
No, you're good.
I don't know if you heard that or not,
I
but there
did.
was a
It's like a giant is hungry and his stomach is growling, like, oh, want to eat.
yeah. So I do my best to give my family the excuse that they didn't know any better, because after they figured out that their constant pressure, whippings, whatever they needed to do, whatever they
Yeah.
felt like they needed to do, when they figured out that all it did was drove me away,
Yeah.
like I didn't speak to my family for a few years after
Mm,
I turned 18.
yeah.
Like I started going through a rebellious stage in high school, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit when we start talking about other topics here that we talked about in the pre-interview. And
Yeah.
um, um, and I think that pushing me away changed, but at the same time, it made me the man I am today. Like
Sure.
it made me smart enough to be able to say, "Hey, I don't believe this bullcrap that my family is teaching me. I don't want to accept that there is no God, but I don't. But I mean, it's a possibility."
Right.
And there was a point where I was even an atheist for a few years. And of all things, this is weird. Science changed my mind about that. I went to college, which a lot of my family hasn't done.
Yeah.
And when I went to college, I excelled in physics. That
Okay.
was my favorite subject. But in going into physics, you got to remember, this is backwoods Mississippi. Your high school science class is God made birds. Like you know what
Yes.
I'm saying? Like, so then you get to college and you get into some real science from a guy that was a nerd growing up that was craving that. And you're like, okay, this God crap, but how does it really work? And then you get into that. And then to me, there were questions I had for physics that my teacher of all people, my professor, loved talking to me. She hated me my first 6 weeks until we had our first exams, and I was the only person that aced it.
Mhm.
And because she thought I was a smart ass because I was always coming to school stoned and asking 100 million questions. And then when the test came, I aced it. And so we would have after class discussions. She would tell me to save it for after class if I had a question. And uh, some things in the world and the universe just doesn't make sense to me without some kind of creation. And
It's interesting. So, when did you talked about as being a teenager and rebelling? When did you find, not just in, we're going to get to Guns N' Roses in a minute, but secular music? I'll put that umbrella, not necessarily rock and roll, but secular music, right? Like,
oh, I went straight to rock and roll.
okay.
I gravitated immediately to rock and roll, and I remember the moment I discovered rock and roll. Because keep in mind, I wasn't allowed to listen to the radio. At one point, my mom was like telling my dad that, listen, we got to let him listen to the other shit that kids listen to, or he's never gonna and maybe that'll help him stop being so rebellious against it. And really, I was just smarter than them. I hate to say it,
Yeah.
but that was her thinking, was that if we listen, let him listen. So then I had my mom, who don't know what the kids like, trying to pick the music that I'm allowed to listen to. So in all of these Bill Gaither and gospel CDs and stuff that I had in my collection that I never freaking listened to, by the way, I hated music before I discovered rock and roll.
Mm.
There was one Britney Spears record in
Well,
there.
the kids like that.
Yeah.
Dustin's gonna like Britney Spears. Look how pretty she is.
And I will admit, there's two songs I liked on that record, and neither one of them I ever heard on the radio.
Okay.
I wouldn't dare tell you what they are. You'll just have to buy the record and see if you
Okay.
can guess. It was the first one, the pink one.
Sure.
I don't remember what it was called. It
Okay.
was just, I remember it was pink and it had her on the front.
How
But
funny.
the when I discovered rock and roll, this is when the devil came in and he took my soul, according to my family. This is the moment it happened. I went down to the crossroads behind my house and I took my guitar and I said, "Oh, great Satan, appear before." I'm fucking with. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No, seriously. This is honestly what happened. This is the exact moment. We lived in the middle of nowhere, and one circumstance is a long story, but we ended up at one point in my life living with my great grandmother,
Okay.
who was also extremely Christian, extremely wanted to brainwash me into this way my family believes, but at the same time was smarter than the rest of my family.
Okay.
My great grandmother was the only friend I had for a little while, for many years, and uh, that's a sore subject also, uh, because when she passed away, that's one I never really got over.
Okay.
But to move the conversation forward to rock and roll, we lived with her for a few years, and there were two barns. We lived in the middle of nowhere. We lived in the middle of the freaking woods.
Yeah.
And I have muted my phone like 14 times, and I still keep getting text messages. Give me just a second. Let me just turn the damn thing off.
Okay.
But we lived in the middle of the freaking woods, and we had two old barns that we didn't really use for anything. One, my dad straight up gave me that me and some friends of mine, we thought it was cool because we had our own clubhouse, basically, with a He-Man Woman Haters Club. But the other one was behind the house, and inside of it, my dad kept his fishing boat. And so my dad's fishing boat, something happened one day. I don't remember what led me to being inside of dad's boat barn shed thing, but something led me there. Now, this barn has been there for like a freaking 100 years before I was ever even thought, before my dad was ever even a thought. Like these barns we were playing in, we would be up in the loft falling with like, and the board would break and we'd get a leg through all the time. We didn't even have a ladder to get up to the loft. We climbed up the side of the loft. Like this was a whole different time. It was crazy. But this barn in the backyard where my dad kept his boat, one day, I don't know what I was doing, but I was piffing around out there. And up in the top of almost the roof, there was like where the roof comes in like this. And there was like a kind of a little bitty ledge. And I saw something plastic caught my eye sticking out of that ledge. And I reached up and I took it. And it was a cassette tape that had obviously been there for many, many years. It was covered in dust and grass, and I blew it off. And it was AC/DC. And I go, "What's this?" Probably one of my dad's brothers hiding it from grandma back in the day. And it was AC/DC's Back in Black.
Okay.
And that was my first rock album.
How funny.
That was when I went from hating music to loving music to knowing that I can never let anybody know I have this tape. This was under my pillow, hidden away from the family.
Yeah, like some guys might hide, cigarettes or a Playboy, you've got this AC/DC cassette, like, shh.
Oh, I did all of that.
I understand. I didn't think you might, and to keep it biblical, right? That was your road to Damascus moment, right? You were Saul, and all of a sudden the light came in, and you became Paul.
It really was. I mean,
yeah,
it's weird to think about that. I mean, and now that I'm sitting here and actually pondering on it, that one random ass day in Mississippi of me just going about, oh geez, sorry,
no, that's good. Yeah,
of me just going about my life, changed my life and changed who. If I had never stumbled onto that tape,
yeah,
I mean, I probably would have discovered it, but then I would be older, and it's just weird to think about how different my life would be if it wasn't for that one little weird moment that came along in my life.
So I usually ask this to my guests that are Bruce fans, and I understand if you can't articulate this, though you've done a great job articulating. When did you discover Guns N' Roses, and what about the music spoke to you in such a way that you are now doing a podcast about them? Obviously, there must be something about their music that spoke to you.
There's a lot. I mean,
hey, we've got time.
I got the. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah, we did.
I got the. I've always been. Sorry.
That's close. Do you need to go? We can always reschedule. Okay, we're good.
No. I live in the middle of the city. If it gets too bad, the sirens will go off.
Okay. Just want to let you know. Okay.
It just scared me. That's all.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
I'm going to close this a little bit just so I can kind of get the breeze, and I'm going to pull down the curtains so that the lightning will quit distracting me.
Okay. No problem.
Oh, Guns N' Roses, man. This is a hard one. I've always been a casual fan of GNR.
Okay.
When I was, I want to say 12, maybe 13. It's weird how you remember things, because if I tried to do the math, I would be either a hell of a lot younger or a hell of a lot older than I'm remembering. But a friend of mine had a tape. A VHS tape. We didn't call them VHS back then. We just called them tapes.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine had a tape, and he said, I went to his house, and he said, have you ever heard of Guns N' Roses? Because now this is old. This is back in the day when the fact that they're saying dirty words is enough to catch our attention.
Yes.
And the tape was, it turns out, was Tokyo, Japan, Use Your Illusion 1 from 1992, I believe.
Okay.
There was a 2-tape set. He had the first tape on a tape that had been copied from a tape that had been copied from a tape that had been copied, that he gave me and said, check this out. I think you'll like it. And then he gave it to me and told me I could have it. So I went home and listened to it, and I watched it. And the first thing, because coming from the life and the way I was raised, where everything you do, anything that'll bring you any kind of remote pleasure seems to end in eternal damnation and hellfire and brimstone. And
well, just while you're thinking, I remember, Three Dog Night, the Joy to the World, and he always had some mighty good wine. You couldn't sing that, right? Like, as that's a nasty lyric, growing up in a Baptist, right? Oh, like, because, and people don't understand.
They don't.
And aren't raised in that at my household, if you have a drink of beer or a glass of wine,
you better repent.
Your next step is you're a drunk in the gutter. You
There's
know,
no middle ground.
there is like you have one sip, the next step you are in the gutter, just
shooting up
yeah,
and
exactly. Like, you are just you are the prodigal son living with pigs, that you just they're just I mean, it goes straight to the gutter. Do not pass go. Do
yeah,
not
there's
collect your soul. It is like, and it was so strange when I started dating my wife. She was Catholic, and at 12 they're having wine at dinner. I mean, just small glasses of
of
wine, right?
course.
Right. And for the funny thing, Dustin, right? For the long time, she didn't trust me because I didn't drink.
Oh,
I never drank. That was not something I didn't, I never rebelled that way. And it wasn't until she realized, hey, I have a built-in designated driver. Maybe this guy isn't so bad.
my
So
best friend and my best friend in the whole world is a guy named Michael Rees. He's never been
yeah.
on my podcast. He's never been anything related to
Hmm.
media that I've done. He's made appearances, but not in a
Yeah.
long time. But in real life, my best friend in the world is a guy named Michael Rees. And when people ask, like, uh, people that know me in Mississippi
Yeah.
think of me as part of a duo, like Beavis and Butthead. Like
Yeah.
if somebody sees me in Mississippi, and the first question I always get is, "Where's Reese?" Because like
Yes.
people are
Okay.
so
Got it.
used to us being together. Jesus. But anyway, he when we first started hanging out was in college, and the thing that I tell people, which is kind of BS, but it sounds good, it sounds funny when people ask, "How did you guys become good friends?" I like to drink, he likes to drive. We've been best friends since college.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. So anyway, not to get you off on a tangent. It's okay. So um, you know, you're, you discover, a tape of a tape of a tape of
Yeah,
Guns N'
Guns N'
Roses,
Roses.
and for some reason it speaks to you.
It I think here's what's funny. You want to know who the last person's name I learned in the band was?
Too.
Axel.
Okay.
Because Axel in the tape introduces everybody else and
Right.
nobody introduces Axel.
Right.
Uh I liked when I was little Todd or fucking oh, shoot, what was his name? Teddy Zigzag
Hmm.
was I thought he was a legitimate member of the band when I
Hmm.
was little because but I liked him because I thought he looked like a pirate because he wore the fluffy
Yeah.
frilly shirt and my and his song that opens with him on the harmonica was my favorite part of the tape and it's still one of my favorite songs. um it starts I can't stop thinking and then the song um uh Jesus Christ, I'm drawing like can't stop thinking about sinking. Give me a second. Bad Obsession is the name of the song.
Hmm.
And when I'm a kid, I'm like, I don't know all the words he's saying because, he's singing and I can't understand everything he's saying. Uh, uh, but it turns out the song is about shooting up and doing heroin.
Okay.
and, I never knew that as a kid. I just thought it was a catchy, fun song and had a
Hmm.
cool harmonica at the front
Sure.
of it. But I would later go on when I met a guy at work named Rick Dunsford. And if you're inside the Guns N' Roses community, you know that name, especially the online community.
Okay.
With the leaks and everything that's been going on lately, you know Rick's name. Uh, I did not. I met Rick at work.
Okay.
They set me down at the time I was doing a stupid little YouTube show and they brought me into work and they sat me down at what will be my new cubicle and he turns around and he's right beside me and he's all excited to meet me and he knows about what I do on the internet and all this other shit and so I'm like okay, I didn't know what
Hmm.
to say to that. Well, he and I became best of friends and he was a diehard Guns N' Roses, is still today a diehard Guns N' Roses fan. I was still a casual fan at the time and he had a lot to do with getting me into the community. I mean, I came in late I missed out on a lot of things. I missed out on the entire Chinese democracy waiting for the album era
Okay.
But when I started running with him, we started following them. That was the first time I made enough money I made grown ass adult money, as I call it, for the first time in my life. And I was able to afford to follow this band on tour. And after, I would say it took one show, even without the original lineup, even without the follow up to the original lineup, like this lineup had changed like six times by the time I saw them.
Hmm.
And even with that lineup, with those songs, man, just something about it like would make me want to dance, cry, fight, whatever they were going for. I was easily manipulated by this band. And I remembered like it was a blend of stuff that I'd never heard mixed with a blend of things that I remember from when I was a kid and I had that tape.
Hmm.
And Chinese Democracy is probably my favorite Guns N' Roses album, second only to Appetite by Destruction for Destruction.
Okay.
Um, those two records, Use Your Illusion is great, and Lies is great. I mean, their worst song I think is okay,
Hmm.
but it just I think part of what gets it for me, and with the way I was raised that you got to be a man. You can't show any kind of emotion. You can't, like, you've got one of two modes. You got angry or you got working.
Hmm.
Like, that was all you were allowed to be, angry or work it, or you were gay.
Hmm.
That's just how the people in the South in the 90s saw it.
Right.
But Guns N' Roses, they lure you in with the angry songs. For me, they brought me in with the angry songs. Out to Get Me, Night Train, uh, My Michelle, Dead Horse, like the Stomper songs, Welcome to the Jungle. Even they lure you in with those those angry rage, energy
Hmm.
filled bangers. But then they give you songs like Catcher in the Rye, This I Love, November Rain, and Estranged, that by the time you get to those songs, you've experienced the rage and the energy and that side of the coin that is the band, that then in turn, at least for me, felt like it gave me permission to feel vulnerable.
Okay. That's interesting. I always preface this question, Dustin, with the amount of times you've seen a band live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are. Specifically, like, Bruce Springsteen, he's been in since the 70s. If you lived in the East Coast, and you've discovered him in 75, 76, and you live in Jersey, New York, Philly, the chance to see him, multiple times.
Yeah.
But for the record, um, like I said, it's not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are, but how many times have you seen them live, and do you count?
14.
14. Okay.
And I have tickets to my 15th show already purchased for, hopefully by then I'll have my damn COVID shot if this
Okay.
cold goes away.
Okay. Where are they going to perform? Where are they performing?
Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
I've I've seen them in Chicago once before.
Okay.
They did a small state, I wouldn't say stadium, but a small club tour back in 2012 called Once in a Lifetime. I went twice
Okay.
because the clubs they were playing in were so small that tickets went so fast. Uh, I had a friend on the inside, shout out, that made it possible
Okay.
for me to get to go twice. So this will be my second time seeing them in Chicago,
Okay.
and I'm really excited about it because it's really important to me because my girlfriend is going with me to this one,
Hmm.
and everybody that's a major player in my life, other than like my dad and my mom, for
Yeah.
example, but all my best friends who, if I were going to take over the world, these would be the generals in my army,
Yeah.
have seen Guns N' Roses with me at least once.
Okay.
and some it takes, some they don't care for,
Right.
because it is at the end of the day just another freaking band. I
Well,
often
and
forget that, but
so, right, like I say, there's two kinds of people in the world: the people that go to their first Bruce Springsteen show and go, "Damn, that was long," and the others that go, "Oh my goodness, when can I see him again?" Right. Uh, so, so talk to me. You've talked a little bit already, but um, Guns and Guns and Radio is the podcast. What what made you? It sounds like you were already doing something with social media, with either YouTube or other stuff. So talk to me about kind of your background and why did you decide to do a GNR podcast?
well, I've done other podcasts and various shows in the past on both YouTube, Blog TV, if anybody out there remembers that.
Hmm.
I used to get, which was where a lot of my success was, I used to get 10,000 people watching me live every week.
Wow.
That number would go up and down because they were live, but it never went under 10 back in the day. That was probably the peak of my success. But they also Blog TV liked my show and they put me on the front page every week, so I can't take credit for that. It's cheating. But I started out in the wrestling business. I
Okay.
got into the wrestling business when I was 16. I lied about my age, and it's a lot. That's a whole other story. But I feel like that's where I got a lot of my chops for being able, because I used to do commentary and things like that. So that also helped me get my chops up to be ready to podcast and stuff like that in its own way. I'm not saying I'm the greatest. I'm not saying I'm great at all. I'm not even saying I'm okay, but I mean, I have fun. So that's
What
all
kind
I
of
really.
wrestling did you cover?
Professional wrestling.
Okay, yeah, that's what I meant. Like WCW,
No, 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 no.
WWF.
We had our own promotion.
Okay,
We had
okay,
our own local promotion. I snuck in to keep that part of the story brief. I went when I got my driver's license at 16. Wrestling was the devil. That was another thing that was devil
sure, of
worship. I
course,
wasn't.
everything's the devil, right?
Yeah, I wasn't
Going to the
allowed
movie
to.
theater on Sundays would be the devil.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So I wasn't allowed to watch wrestling in the 90s. But when I got my driver's license, by then I figured out that, you know, what mama don't know won't hurt her. And mama don't know what I'm doing. So,
Right.
I mean, for lack of a better word, screw her. Uh, I almost said the F word. See, I'm doing good. I'm looking
You're
at my
doing
don't
great.
cuss sign
You're
over
doing great,
here.
Dustin. You are doing great.
But anyway, my first time I went, I had $5 in my pocket, and the second time I went, I figured out, you know, there's a door over there that looks like it leads to outside, and I don't see any of these security guards watching it, so I snuck in. And this was immediate. This was my first weekend as a free man driving his car for the first time.
Okay.
That my grandpa gave me, because shout out to Papa. He was always good in all this BS. He was kind of the what do you call it, the one that was reasonable.
Okay.
But my first weekend out, I paid $5 and went to see wrestling. My second weekend out, I didn't have $5, but I noticed there wasn't any security guards watching this door, so I came in that door. My third my third weekend, I wanted to meet some wrestlers, so I made a bull. This is so stupid. I made a BS pass and put it around my neck and walked around in the back, acting like I was interviewing people and taking pictures. And my fourth week, I tried that again, and they figured out I didn't. Nobody hired me,
Yeah.
and but they'd already saw the pictures I was taking, and they really wanted to use those. So I ended up getting a job putting together a website, and then one thing led to another. I eventually found a promoter and lied and said I was an announcer, and because an announcer didn't show up, and that was total BS. I just happened to be at that show. Wasn't even the show I would end up being familiar with.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, one thing led to another, that led to another, that led to
Okay.
another, that led to me being in that full time. I got mad. I used to have a really bad temper back in the wrestling
Okay.
business. Uh, I was known for having a bad temper, but I was known for drawing money.
Okay.
So people put up with my crap because I could make money. But at the same time, um, I had to get out of it. I mean, I came back eventually, but there was a period where I quit for about 3 or 4 years, and I had to get out of it to get my head together, to be able to come back and show everybody he's actually a decent guy. Because I mean, when I came back, I was. When I left, I probably was a bit of an a hole.
Okay.
But uh, which you have to be when you're not tough,
I
and
understand.
everybody's big and muscular and scary,
Yeah.
and some guy with giant muscles that could pound you in the ground grabs you by the arm and jerks you over to tell you how it's going to be. To me, the only reaction you can have is both hands around his neck and put him up against the wall, and you tell him how it's going to be, to send a message. Like, he didn't know that he could pound my butt in the ground
Right.
without breaking a sweat after that. But that's where I started out. Now with Guns and Radio, by the time it came along, I hadn't done a podcast in about 2 years. I was married for a few years, and then I became single again. And when I was married, my ex-wife didn't really support these ventures very much. She kind of made me feel like I was wasting my time. And then so I quit doing them, and then I got out on my own. And when I got out on my own, I started getting the itch to do a podcast again. Now, it took me many years to do Guns and Radio, even after I discovered Pod of Thunder. I loved listening to Pod of Thunder because I'm also a Kiss fan. But I was really, really hoping somebody else would come along and do this show,
Okay.
because I just wanted to listen to it. I didn't want to be on it. I wanted to listen to it. And after many, many, many years of nobody, and a Guns N' Roses podcast had come up, Appetite for Distortion with Brando, a real good friend of ours. When we came on the scene, he brought us on his show and helped us boost our audience. The GNR community has been great to us. Um, but no matter what, nobody was doing this show, and I just wanted to listen to it. Like, that's all I wanted. And so I figured, okay, nobody's going to do this show. Hell with this. I'm going to do it myself. So I sent out a message on Patreon. No, not Patreon. No, Discord. I was in a Discord server about Guns N' Roses, and I just posted a thing, said, hey, I've got an idea for a podcast. Anybody want to be a podcast co-host with me? And Chris Caputo was the first person that answered. And he and we actually recorded our first conversation ever. I didn't know this kid from Adam. We sat down and we just instantly had chemistry. Like, that's a big thing when you got a code. You can't. I've done enough podcasts to know that you can't have anybody. You can have your best friend sitting beside you, and you guys might have best friend chemistry in real life, but if you don't have that show chemistry
Right. I understand.
together, yeah, I mean, I know you do, but
Yeah.
I
No, I
don't
get.
know.
No, I get it.
But you know what I mean? If you don't have that being able to have a show chemistry together, it's never going to work. You're going to struggle through it until one of you has to have that hateful conversation, or you quit doing the show and you abandon the idea altogether.
Right.
Caputo and I had instant chemistry. We don't really hang out. We don't know each other all that well. I mean, I think of him as a friend.
Yeah.
I don't make a decision that has anything to do with the podcast without asking him first. But I mean, he came on and we just had that instant. And I think that's a lot of too. I think that really helps our relationship for the podcast, is the fact that we don't have to worry about hurting the other's feelings because we don't hang out afterwards. So
Right.
if I'm doing something and he's like, yo, bro, you're screwing this up, he can feel like he can just tell me,
Interesting.
and vice versa. Like, I never would tell him that. I would just try to find ways to work around. But I need somebody to tell me when I'm screwing up. So
What's interesting, Dustin, is over 5 years ago, I was doing a Doctor Who podcast. I had done a Castle podcast with Nathan Fillion's show, we were doing
Yeah.
episodes. I
Miss
had,
Firefly.
yeah, oh yes, so much. Did um, a a Farscape. I was one of the guys on a Farscape podcast. You
Never
know,
seen Farscape
yeah.
though.
So I was the newbie. That was the premise. They had two co-hosts. They would have someone who'd seen every episode of Farscape, and then me who'd never seen anything, and I was watching them in chronological order. And so you'd have a newbie and an expert, and it was
Oh,
no
that's a really
spoilers.
good. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it was a really good concept. And um, so I Lynette Carolla, Adam Carolla's wife, had done 3 or 4 episodes where she had interviewed friends of hers and Adam that were Springsteen fans, including Phil Rosenthal, who was the co-creator of Everyone Loves Raymond. And they didn't talk anything about their celebrity. They just talked about how much they loved Bruce and his music. And then she quit doing them. And I went, God, I really want to have that podcast. And so, in the spirit of lighting a candle instead of cursing the darkness, and that's why I'm telling the story, even though my audience is going, yes, we know this story, Jesse, is I went to the guy that runs our network and I said, hey, Rob, I want to do a Bruce Springsteen podcast. And he goes, okay, what's that? And I'm like, well, I'm going to find Bruce Springsteen fans and I'm going to talk to them. How are you going to find them? I'm going to use social media. And so he told me just this recently, he hung up the phone and he looked at his wife, Martha, who was, the co-owner. And he says, so Jesse's going to do a Springsteen podcast. He says, I think we'll get a season out of it. Well, that 5 years later and 600 episodes later, and
Wow.
so, and, and the show has morphed, and I'm going to talk to you about y'all's where, but from the very beginning, and this, I give Rob credit. He said, I'm listening to you talk about Bruce Springsteen, and I feel the same way about Wilco. He said, I wonder if you could have other guests join you and talk about other musicians, right? And I said, yeah, and I could call them B-side episodes,
Huh.
the
Nice.
B single, right? And so I've done that. And now through this years, I've learned that what I really do is I love talking to people that are passionate about anything, right? Like I love talking to other podcasters because 95% of them are articulate, they're interesting, they're passionate, and they make a great guest. And so that's why, as you saw, when I go to Facebook, I'm like, if you can even talk about music, we'll squeeze you into my episode. And like, look at you and we are an hour plus. And
I
I
have
hope,
that bad habit, by the
no,
way.
I hope people have enjoyed the conversation. I know I have. And I
I
hope you
have
have.
too, so I hope somebody out
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
has.
As I mentioned, at this point, Dustin and I have been talking an hour. So I'm going to break the podcast into 2 parts. Come back tomorrow for the rest of the conversation. Thanks. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Mary Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash and right now, who does? You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only, Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.